My sister tried to tear my life apart by feeding lies to my 4-year-old daughter, but what I revealed changed everything. I watched my sister, Chloe, kneel before my 4-year-old daughter, Lily, her red dress spreading around her like spilled wine, and lie directly to her face, shattering her world with a smile. The silence in the garden that night was not peaceful. It was the suffocating calm before a storm I had been silently preparing for, but never truly expected to unleash myself. Dusk had fallen, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, as string lights shimmered across Eleanor's meticulously manicured garden. The air, heavy with the scent of jasmine and expensive perfume, vibrated with a fragile gaiety, but beneath the polished surface, a discordant hum of unspoken truths lingered, waiting to break free. It was my mother, Eleanor's 75th birthday, a milestone. And despite the silent wars raging behind my own closed doors, I'd poured everything into making it perfect for her. She deserved nothing less. Tiny stars, those fairy lights, danced above the garden pavilion, mirroring the desperate sparkle I tried to keep in my own eyes. The caterers were just placing the last, delicate dessert onto the table when David, my husband, brushed past me. Not a word, not a glance. Just that familiar, bone-chilling coldness. That should have been my first warning. The first tremor of the earthquake that was coming. But I was so consumed with keeping Eleanor's smile intact, so busy pretending my marriage wasn't suffocating me with every breath, that I missed it. Eleanor, radiant in her white linen dress, her silver hair shimmering with the diamond clips my father had given her half a century ago, called me over. "Come, darling," she said, her hand reaching for mine. "Sit beside me." I squeezed in, feeling her kiss on my forehead, the comforting scent of her Chanel No. 5 a fragile anchor to happier times. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to pretend, to believe everything was still as it should be. Then Chloe arrived. Late, of course. She always made an entrance, the kind where the entire room seemed to rearrange itself around her. Her red dress, the exact shade she knew would scream for attention, her laugh a little too loud as she embraced Eleanor. I watched her, a knot of familiar dread tightening in my stomach. Chloe existed in a different category. The brilliant one, the beautiful one, the one who never had to try because life simply bent to her will. She had also been my closest confidant. 6 months ago, I had told her everything during those late-night calls. Whispered about David's distance, how he'd stopped touching me, stopped looking at me. I'd cried, huddled in my car, convinced my marriage was crumbling, and Chloe had listened. She'd soothed me with promises that it would get better, that men went through phases. She'd told me what I needed to hear, all while sleeping with him. I found out 3 weeks ago. I came home early from a client meeting, Lily's school calling to say she had a fever. The house was quiet in that specific, unsettling way that screams wrongness. The silence of people trying not to be heard. I climbed the stairs, each step heavy, my mind already bracing for a terrible knowledge I hadn't yet confirmed. When I opened the bedroom door, the image seared itself into my very soul. Chloe's fiery red hair stark against my white pillowcase. David's hand on her bare shoulder. The way he flinched when he saw me. And the way she didn't. The slow turn of her head, that smirk, that knowing glint in her eyes that told me this wasn't the first time. Just the first time I'd caught them. I didn't make a scene. That's the part that haunted me, the part one replayed endlessly. I simply closed the door, walked downstairs, made myself a cup of tea. By the time David came down, still clumsily tucking in his shirt, I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, the perfect picture of controlled composure. He tried to explain. Pathetic words, hollow excuses. It meant nothing. Just physical. She pursued me. I was confused. I had asked him one question. Just one. Does Eleanor know? He paled.
No. God, no.
Chloe said she wanted to tell you herself. To explain. My voice was quiet, deadly. Get out. Go to a hotel. I don't want you here when Lily comes home. In the weeks that followed, I did exactly what Eleanor had taught me. I held it together. I told myself I would make the right decision at the right time. Rushing would only make it worse. I consulted a lawyer, secretly, opened a separate bank account, called my childhood friend, Sarah, and asked if Lily and I could stay with her, just in case. I did everything a woman in my position was supposed to do, but I hadn't prepared for this. Chloe stood up abruptly during dessert. Her chair scraped backward with a shriek that sliced through the soft jazz and silenced the entire garden. Someone had clearly kept her wine glass full. I watched the dangerous flush in her cheeks, the glassy sheen in her eyes, that sharp, cruel edge to her smile that meant she was about to do something irreversible. "I have an announcement," she slurred, her voice cutting through the stunned quiet. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" Eleanor's hand found mine under the table, squeezing so tight it hurt. Even she, who had raised us both, felt the coming fracture. "I just want to say," Chloe continued, her words precise in their drunkenness, "that I am so grateful for this family, for this gathering, and I am so grateful," she paused for dramatic effect, swaying slightly, "for David. Isn't he wonderful? Doesn't he just light up a room?" The blood drained from my face. Guests shifted, uncomfortable. Eleanor's grip tightened, a lifeline. "I'm grateful for him because," Chloe said, her eyes locking onto mine, glinting with a venom I didn't recognize, "because I'm in love with him. We're having an affair. We have been for 6 months, and it's been absolutely spectacular." The garden seemed to collapse in on itself. I heard Aunt Beth gasp, saw Uncle Tom awkwardly stand, unsure where to put his suddenly useless body. Every eye in that garden burned into me, a terrible cocktail of pity and scandal. I should have been humiliated. I should have cried. I should have screamed at Chloe, told them all I already knew, that I was handling it, that this public destruction was cruel and unnecessary. But I didn't. Instead, something hard and cold crystallized inside me. A moment of absolute, blinding clarity. Chloe wasn't finished. She swayed towards me, and it hit me with a shock. This wasn't impulsive drunkenness. This was planned. A performance, rehearsed in her twisted mind, probably countless times. "And there's something else," she purred, her voice sickly sweet, making my skin crawl. "Something I've always wanted to say." She turned to Lily. My 4-year-old daughter sat beside me on a small chair, legs swinging, happily eating cake, utterly oblivious to the gathering storm. She wore the white dress I'd chosen, tiny yellow flowers, matching the party's theme, her golden curls pinned with a matching ribbon. So small,
So trusting.
so unaware that her world was about to be shattered by the person she called Aunt Chloe. "Lily's sweetheart," Chloe said, kneeling down, her red dress fanning around her like blood on the grass. "I want to tell you something very important, something your mommy has been lying to you about your whole life." My breath caught. My body froze, already bracing for impact. "Your adopted sweetheart," Chloe whispered, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "Your mommy isn't even your real mommy. She's a liar. She lied to you every single day of your life." The words hung in the air, poison gas spreading through the twilight. I watched Lily's face crumple, watched her look at me, confused, frightened eyes wide. She didn't understand the words, not truly, but she understood the tone. She understood that something terrible had just been revealed. That was when I stood up. My chair crashed backwards, forgotten. Everyone stared, waiting for the dramatic collapse, the tears, the broken woman. They were expecting a victim. They were not expecting what I actually did. "Everyone," I said, my voice steady, clear, cutting through the horrified silence like a sharpened blade. "I need everyone to sit down and listen carefully, because the liar in this room isn't me. And I think it's time that everyone understood exactly what Chloe is." Chloe's face went white. She straightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. "Lily," I said, kneeling beside my daughter, taking her small, trembling hand. "I need to tell you something very important, and I want you to listen very carefully. I am your mommy. I grew you in my body. I gave birth to you. You are mine, completely, absolutely, forever mine, okay?" Lily nodded, her bottom lip quivering, tears welling. Aunt Chloe said something that wasn't true. I continued softly. Sometimes people say things that hurt other people because they're hurting inside, okay? And that's never okay, but it doesn't change the fact that you're my daughter. Do you understand? Yes, Mommy, Lily whispered, burying her face into my shoulder. I stood, holding her hand, and faced the assembled crowd. Eleanor watched me, her eyes filled with a profound understanding. She had always known I was stronger than I looked. I am going to tell you all something, I said, my voice rising unwavering. And I want you to understand that I am not angry when I say this. I am done. I am done being quiet. I am done protecting people who don't deserve protection. I looked directly at Chloe. Chloe came to my home 6 months ago asking for a loan. $30,000. She said she was in financial trouble, debt from an ex, apartment problems. I gave it to her. No questions asked. She's my sister. A collective gasp rippled through the garden. Chloe's face was now mottled with color, rage, and panic warring for dominance. 2 weeks later, I continued, I discovered she was using that money to fund a trip around Europe. With my husband. The gasps turned to horrified murmurs. When I found them together, David confessed. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was planned. My sister spent weeks manipulating him, telling him I was cold, unappreciative, that our marriage was already over. She told him she'd always had feelings for him, which, by the way, she also told me a year ago, at Christmas, after too much wine, just testing the waters. The ripple of shocked whispers grew into a wave. I also discovered, I said, my voice never faltering, that Chloe had been stealing from our mother.
Not large amounts.
Small things.
Jewelry.
Money from the charity fundraisers Eleanor managed. Items of sentimental value. I found them in her apartment when I went there to confront her about the affair. I have photographs. I have a list. And I have a detective who has been documenting everything for the past 3 weeks. Chloe's face was bone white. She looked like she might simply dissolve. But here's the thing that truly brought me to this moment, I said, picking Lily up, settling her on my hip, her little arms tight around my neck. When someone decides to weaponize a child to hurt her own sister, when someone decides to create trauma in a 4-year-old girl just to score a point in a game she's the only one playing, that's when I realized all the patience, all the grace I've been taught, all the dignity and composure I've tried to maintain means absolutely nothing if it means protecting someone who is willing to hurt my baby. Eleanor had stood up. She looked at Chloe, not with anger, but with profound, heartbreaking disappointment. And somehow, that seemed to hurt Chloe more than any of my words. David isn't here tonight because we're no longer married, I stated calmly. I've already filed. He's going to be civilly, legally, and financially responsible for his choices. And Chloe, I paused, looking at my sister with something that surprised me, a deep, profound sadness. Chloe is going to be legally responsible as well. I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to Uncle Tom, standing closest. An audio file, time-stamped 2 hours before the party. In it, Chloe's voice, clear and cold, explained to David why she was going to destroy me at the party, why she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. Then her voice, chillingly calculated, said, if I humiliate her publicly, she'll have no choice but to resign from the foundation board. And then I'll finally have the position that should have been mine from the start. It was never about David. It was never about David. My sister wanted my position on the charity foundation board, where I've been working for 15 years. I explained to the crowd, my voice raw with revelation. She wanted the prestige, the connections, the opportunities. And she was willing to burn down my marriage, my reputation, and my child's emotional well-being to get it. Chloe made a strangled sound, a pathetic whimper, and then she turned and walked away, pushing through the stunned guests, her red dress disappearing into the twilight and finally, the darkness beyond the garden gate. Several people immediately stood to follow her, then others, until the garden seemed to collectively exhale, a long, shaky breath it had been holding all evening. Eleanor came to me. She took Lily from my arms, held her granddaughter close, murmuring soft reassurances. Then she looked at me, tears in her own eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "I'm so proud of you, Grace." We left after that. I didn't stay. I took Lily home to Sarah's, where we had already set up our things, where I had prepared a space that finally felt safe. I tucked Lily into bed, reading her 3 extra stories, answering her confused questions as gently as I could, promising her that sometimes people say mean things, and it had nothing to do with her. "I'm your mommy," I told her, my voice thick with emotion, "and that will never, ever change." The next morning, my lawyer called. There had been a complication in the paperwork. A good kind of complication. It turned out Chloe's financial crimes had come to the attention of the authorities. They were building a case. The $30,000 I'd given her? She'd documented it. The jewelry she'd stolen from Eleanor? She'd insured it, leaving a paper trail. The charity funds? All traceable. What Chloe hadn't realized, in her arrogance, in her assumption that she was the smartest person in the room, was that she had been sloppy. She thought humiliating me publicly would destroy me. Instead, she had crystallized my resolve. She had reminded me that sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop protecting people who don't deserve protection and start protecting the people who do. I didn't win anything in the traditional sense. My marriage was over. My relationship with my sister was utterly destroyed. Part of my family was fractured, probably irreparably. But Lily was safe, and I was free. And I had finally, after decades of absorbing Eleanor's lessons in grace and composure, learned to understand them differently. Grace wasn't about suffering in silence. Dignity wasn't about letting people hurt you. And composure wasn't about pretending everything was fine when it absolutely was not. Grace was knowing exactly when to speak and what to say. Dignity was refusing to let anyone diminish your worth. And composure was standing absolutely still while the world fell apart, knowing exactly what you were going to do next. I had spent 5 years building the case against David and Chloe without either of them knowing it. I had documented everything. I had been patient, methodical, and absolutely certain. And when the moment came to act, I had acted decisively. That was the real story everyone would be talking about. Not the affair, not the humiliation at the party, but the woman who had taken her power back so completely that there was no question of who had won and who had lost. Chloe faced charges for fraud and embezzlement. David faced a divorce settlement that left him considerably poorer. And I went back to my position at the foundation, a position that was now secure, given that everyone understood exactly what happened and why. Lily eventually understood that sometimes people hurt each other, and that had nothing to do with whether or not they were loved. She grew up knowing her mother was strong, not because she never broke, but because she had broken, and then rebuilt herself into something unbreakable. Months later, on her 76th birthday, exactly 1 year after everything had broken open, Eleanor and I sat in that same garden. Lily was building a sandcastle with her grandmother. Eleanor took my hand and said the words I had needed to hear all along. "You were never the liar, my darling. You were always the truth-teller. You were just waiting for the right moment to tell it." And that, finally, was exactly what I needed to believe. What would you have done in Grace's shoes? Would you have kept silent? Or would you have chosen to reveal everything, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a moment that felt impossible, tell us your story.